This webinar series launched last year, and due to the high level of interest, we brought it back with a slate of new topics and speakers. Minitex is a state-funded library organization located at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Our mission is to strengthen libraries, cultural institutions, and the communities they serve. Our format today will be about 15 to 20 minutes of presentation by our speakers, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. The session will be recorded and made available via our Minitex YouTube channel. Feel free to type your questions in the chat at any time, and we will be sure to get to them during the Q&A time. You can also choose to raise your hand and unmute when called upon to ask your question at that time. And just a little bit about us today. I'm Ann Casti. I am an outreach and instruction librarian at Minitex, and with us is Carla Fall, also an outreach and instruction librarian at Minitex. And we brought two more Minitex folks in for the session today to tell you about the React framework, Matt Lee and Greg Argo, and they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves when they get there. So let's kick it off.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. And hello, everyone. My name is Matt Lee. I'm with Minitex. Welcome to the session today. Let me get my slides started. Greg and I are happy to be with you today. Yeah, we're happy to be here with you today. Anne has already described kind of what Minitex is. We feel lucky to serve libraries in the Minnesota region and North and South Dakota as well. I work primarily on the e-resource side of the house. I'm associate director at Minitex for e-resources and cooperative purchasing. And I have been involved in this AI project. Greg, my colleague, has helped put this presentation together today. Greg, would you say a word of hello to the folks here?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Greg. I'm working in open education part of my time here at Minitex, and the other part I do cooperative purchasing, things like that, and I've been around the block a few times. Um, and who knows what the future holds? I guess we're looking into that.
We are. Cozy up with your PB&J or whatever else is on the menu for lunch today. We'll do a little bit of talking here at the outset. I'll take the initial kind of set of slides and a couple of pieces of demonstration, and then Greg will rejoin us for some discussion questions that we have for you because we're sort of figuring our way through AI and library databases, and we'll be curious to hear where you are in that figuring and what kind of questions or perspectives you're bringing to the discussion today. Um, Here is our brief agenda of where we'll go. I'm going to start with some just brief background and context to where we started in this. I'll talk about our AI evaluation project, give an overview to that, talk briefly about sort of the process that we went through to structure that evaluation and how we eventually came to the React framework. I'll say a bit about what we know about that and describe some of the outputs and outcomes that we've realized through using that framework. And then, as I say, we do have some discussion questions for you at the end. So background starts sort of in the spring of 2024 when it felt like AI was just sort of swirling in the environment, and it felt like at that point it had like leapt immediately onto the scene, and it just had this clear potential to radically change how people do research, and not just potential, but like we're evidence of how people, including us at Minitex and our jobs, we're doing research and we're doing our work. So there was that sort of swirling of AI out there. Minitex has got some close vendor relationships, including a number of statewide contracts that we hold with our friends at EBSCO and Gale Cengage, and Clarivate, Britannica, and Capstone. So we have close relationships with those companies, as well as additional vendors and publishers through our cooperative purchasing services, including Elsevier and Sage and others. So in the spring of 2024, we really embarked upon a series of meetings with vendors to try to prompt them in telling us what they were thinking about AI and what their plans were for AI in the context of their databases and their research tools. So we had those series of meetings as the sort of calendar ticked and the clock moved forward. Um, New features were rolled out kind of in the marketplace. There's movement in the marketplace toward AI implementation within databases and other resources. And then we also saw libraries kind of grappling with AI in a number of different ways, some being cautious and skeptical, others really being intentional and like trying to stake claims in how their campuses engaged with the evaluation of artificial intelligence and the rollout of that into their teaching and learning environments. And we were particularly inspired by libraries who were really actively engaged um, in AI and seeing where libraries have a role to bring forward our values and our expertise in this arena. So we wanted to engage in a similar way. And so a team at Minitex kind of co-created this structured project to help us to engage in a review of vendor products as we saw them coming out and vendor projects too. So that team included, hey, many of the people that are moderating and involved in this very session here today are outreach and instruction librarians, as well as our cooperative purchasing e-resources librarians. So that includes Ann Casti, Beth Statz, Carla Fall, Ann Hattinen, and Greg Argo, and myself at Minitex. So this is just a quick slide about the like overview about our AI evaluation or assessment project. We started with the scope of AI features within databases. You know, artificial intelligence has a way of just sort of tentacling out in conversation, and so we wanted to make sure that we kept our scope pretty focused. So this was not about like licensing questions or, you know, whether or not we could use or libraries or researchers can use licensed publications and put them into LLMs. It's not about that. It's not really about like how um, vendors incorporate kind of library created metadata into their own AI tools. It feels a little bit different from some of that like OCLC Discovery Service stuff. We're really thinking about AI features in library databases and mostly like aggregator databases. So that was our scope that we defined. We had a goal that was admittedly biased toward adoption of AI. Um, Really, we're, you know, seeing the potential and the ideal in AI to um, help library resources to maintain or like stay on par with user expectations as they conduct research. Try to the potential for AI to help like library resources to remain relevant in the research process and to help researchers get to good research more easily. We know, though, of course, that um, the ideal sometimes falls apart in practice, and so we wanted to be very thoughtful and intentional as we were considering the implementation of AI into our resources. The outcomes that we were sort of aiming for at the beginning was to deploy AI into our statewide databases where it was relevant and where it made sense and where the tools were good enough to do so. In Minnesota, we have statewide licensed resources that are licensed on behalf of all types of libraries around the state. Those libraries can implement individual links into those resources where they can handle all of the administrative setup and background. We also have a statewide portal that authenticates anybody in the state into these resources, and it's in that latter deployment scheme or whatever where we are thinking about deploying these features. Our second goal is to model a review and engagement process in this for libraries, and I will admit that we were probably less successful at that second one, unless you're feeling sort of generous towards me, and maybe this very session is an example of that modeling. So, before I think we get much further, I wanted to just quickly just iterate what an AI feature in a library database is, kind of what are we talking about here. So here are some examples that we have seen deployed in some of our resources or in other library resources. There are tools that can help in search and discovery, like natural language searching, to sort of change from structured keyword searching into a sort of more question-based or loose, unstructured searching. There's features to help with summarization of articles and on the fly, kind of highlighting key points. There's personalization and reading level adjustments that can take complicated scholarly articles, for example, and make them a little more accessible. There are tools to help in research support and sort of building context around a question or around articles, connecting to related articles or resources. We've seen tools to aid in evaluation and again, sort of contextualizing against an article and how we might a score might be applied to that in terms of like where it's used or how the results are used in other places. And then accessibility too, and especially in terms of language and making resources and the research process more open to languages other than English. So in engaging in this evaluation project, we knew that we would need a review matrix. We knew we would need some sort of like standardized approach to help our team to be on the same page as we were reviewing and discussing. So we did what you do at the beginning of a new project, and we tried to reinvent the wheel. We tried to devise our own review matrix and come up with sort of categories of evaluation. Um, we also did what you do in 2025 and asked ChatGPT to reinvent the wheel for us. And both of those were um, interesting, like not unuseful exercises, but I think from my perspective, we got a little wrapped up in discussions of like the evaluation tool itself and the evaluation approach rather than getting wrapped up in what our intention was to get wrapped up in the actual AI features themselves. And so when we discovered the React framework, I think if I remember right, it was Greg that discovered it. It really gave us a good grounding and a good footing to base our discussions upon and to give us a framework um, to move forward as a project. I will note that the React framework was the tool that we discovered. I now know it's not the only tool that is out there. There's probably a good number of them, including the viewfinder tool that you can see linked up there and you can find through Google. But we went with the React framework. So here's a quick overview to what that stands for. And Greg, did you just put a link into the chat? You see that you did. Thank you. So there's a link to the React framework. This is an evaluation tool specifically designed around AI features within library resources. So it was pretty well conceived for us and was pretty easy to implement. It looks at various features of AI tools, both sort of practical, maybe, as well as providing an opportunity to assess against library values and like evaluative too. So it looks at relevance, ease of use, assessing DEIA, currency, and transparency and accuracy. I'm going to jump out to the website here just a second because it provides a pretty good overview to itself. Move my screen around here just a second. So here is the tool developed out of Loyola Marymount University. And it does look at those five key areas: relevance of evaluating tools, relevance to specific needs and objectives, ease of use for usability, DEIA, a little more somewhat complicated and looking at incorporation of diverse perspectives, biases, and equity. There are elements of currency and transparency. As you kind of scroll down on the page, the framework provides rating scales for each of those areas. So you can see here in the relevancy section, a tool or resource that scored the highest number of points would provide highly relevant results, consistently matching the research topic. Ease of use, we'd be looking for tools that provide an intuitive interface with minimal learning curve. Assessing against DEIA, this text probably gets really small for folks. Bump this up a little. Assessing against DEIA is looking for full accessibility for researchers. It's looking for unbiased results. It's looking for availability in many languages and completely free access to the tool. Some of these things are quite hard to judge against with library resources, like they're free for researchers, but not necessarily free. Currency, looking for real-time updates, always reflecting the latest research, and a tool that is highly transparent and accurate, has transparency and accuracy, clearly explaining the AI's decision-making process and data sources. This page itself, in addition to providing this matrix, also provides a couple of templates that an individual organization can use to go through an evaluation of these resources. I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint here. And just to describe briefly a couple of the kind of concrete examples of features that we saw rolling out in some of our resources and in our context and some of the things that we evaluated. So EBSCO has a couple of AI features that we took a look at. One is natural language search. This is kind of that ability to allow researchers to do unstructured searching. If a researcher puts in a question such as why are bees important to the environment, EBSCO's AI essentially translates that into a more Boolean kind of structured search, and it shows a researcher kind of what that translation looks like and what the AI has done to take their unstructured search and put some structure around it. Their other main feature that we looked at is AI Insights, and this is available on HTML full text articles on their platforms. It provides an on-the-fly summary of full text articles that essentially really bullet points out what the key aspects are of a given article, helping a researcher to decide on its relevance or maybe understand the key points in that piece of work. I've got just a slide capture here where you can maybe see, probably a little small text-wise, but underneath the search box at the top, there's a toggle on or off for natural language search. So this is sort of a thing that a library can set as a default and that a user can move back and forth between. And then down at the bottom of that screenshot, an example of AI Insights piece of content, which is a little button that will appear that if a user clicks, the AI will generate a bullet point list kind of on the fly for that piece of material. Another key resource that we looked at comes from Britannica and their Ask Britannica feature. This provides essentially AI summarization of natural language searches that is pulled solely from Britannica content. And so a user can put in a natural language search, a researcher can put in a question. Britannica will pull back a summary and then point to the Britannica articles that it used to create that summary. They've got a screenshot of that too. So yeah, here's a screenshot of a question: why haven't humans landed on Mars? You can see in the main body of the screenshot the generated text, as well as on the right-hand side under the sources button, indication and links to the specific articles or sections of articles that the AI used to craft that summary. Let me jump out of this slide one more time to show just a working example of um, the matrix for Britannica as we used it. We edited the React framework sort of template a little bit to suit our needs, but it takes the sort of the core ideas from that. So here's our assessment sheet for Britannica Academic, including a link to the resource itself, a link to vendor documentation, which is essential for answering a number of questions within the React framework. There are some that a person can find in the tool itself, but we found that you uh, really always have to find vendor documentation on a sort of business website. Date completed and the link to the React framework. So you can see here we've got the relevancy, the scores for relevancy here, the definitions for how we would apply those scores. We've got our various reviewers here in-house at Minitex, the scores that were applied by each of those reviewers, along with comments, and then an overall score for each of these sections. As I scroll down, you can see sometimes scores sort of fall in line. In other cases, there are some kind of variations between individuals, and it's usually in those instances where there's variation that leads to good discussion and opportunities for kind of further exploration and questions back to vendors. Um, the way that we've got this sheet configured, it does kind of total up to a total score, and that might imply like a quantitative approach to this review. Like you could imagine setting some numeric line saying a resource or a tool has to reach 15 or whatever in order to be approved through our process. We didn't use it so much in that way. We used it in more of a kind of qualitatively to inspire discussion and really further our own exploration of these resources. And we eventually used a consensus approach to get to a decision on whether or not we would activate the resources that we were looking at. So in terms of like outcomes and outputs, we had these structured discussions around tools from three different vendors here at the start, EBSCO and Britannica in our statewide collection, as well as looking at Elsevier's Science Direct AI. Um, we um, the scorecards really provided us opportunity to frame up questions around these features to bring back to vendors and really put us in a place of critical inquiry into these features. And the scorecard structure itself was just an opportunity to dive deep. Sort of related, I guess, the outcomes from those tangible outputs were opportunities for advocacy back to vendors. Minitex holds some relatively large scale contracts with vendors, and we feel it's a responsibility to use whatever leverage we can bring to advocate on behalf of libraries and library values. And so this is an opportunity to do that, specifically around continued transparency and how some of these tools work. Um, I think sometimes our vendors look at AI and see it as a potential new product opportunity and new sales opportunity, some kind of new standalone product. And we've used this process and the discussions that it's engendered to really try to push back against that. We believe strongly that there is mutual benefit to incorporating AI into existing resources and interfaces in order to maintain relevancy and aid the research process. And then ultimately, the outcome was that we turned on the EBSCO features in our statewide portal. And we didn't make a huge stink about the Britannica features that were automatically turned on for us, sort of without our knowledge, because they passed our check here. Um, we do continue to monitor AI developments, and we will continue to test them as we see them roll out. We hope to see more of them roll out into um, our resources. Um, and we also always want to share that libraries always have the opportunity to make their own decisions on deployment, especially of these statewide resources. We have the statewide portal that I described before, but libraries can always set up individual links to their own resources and make their own administrative decisions. And if any libraries don't have that, we're happy to help get that set up and to work in that direction. So I'm winding down toward the end of that presentation bit, and we're about to move into some discussion questions. Greg, do you think we should dive right into discussion?
Yes.
Excellent.
Hey, everybody. We just encourage anybody to share experiences they have or thoughts that they've got. Either unmute yourself and speak up or put your thoughts in the chat. Um, I will just go kind of through these discussion questions that you could react to any of these. No pun intended. And uh, um, we can go from there. So, looking at the React framework, do you have any criterion that you think need added to it? Um, at your shop, what other sorts of group processes are happening to try to understand or assess AI? Where in your processes, trialing or signing licenses or just reviewing, are you coming across this kind of work? Um, would the idea of a shared React scorecard across the Minitex network make sense? If we did a project like that, would it what would be the benefits and what would be some of the drawbacks with local conditions and things like that? How do we balance users' excitement for these features with our own caution and have AI features change the way that you're teaching information literacy and databases? Any thoughts out there?
This is Scott from St. Thomas. One thing that when we have discussed these tools internally or tools like it, one thing that I'd love to see added to this is coverage, because there's a lot of these tools that they work slick when there's like full text in there, but not all the publishers have opted in. So it's really inconsistent, like within the same database, where you'll get like some journals where it works really well. And so users like it, but then, their area of research or a particular topic, they don't work at all because it doesn't have abstract, or it either doesn't have the metadata or the full text that it's used to working with to generate that kind of stuff.
And I'm sure it's hard to sort of set user expectations about when that stuff shows up and when it doesn't. And so it can feel random. And yeah, we've discovered that a bit in the EBSCO stuff too, where the AI insights are only available for certain types of articles, and it is a little unpredictable. That's interesting.
Go for it, Chuck.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, one thing that if I was going to add a criterion to the framework, and I'm not sure how this would be, I guess you could assign numeric values to things, but a question that we are frequently talking about. So I'm at Loyola University outside of Los Angeles. Primarily undergraduate education, and we're talking about when you use the AI tools, what kinds of student effort is being outsourced. And I like the natural language tool. We're primarily an EBSCO house, and so I like the natural language tool as a way to have students think about how they're sorry, pop up about that. Anyway, so how their natural language searches would be kind of converted into keyword searches and to be thinking about keywords in their research questions. But I also don't want them to get away from just the open brainstorming phase of what are the key ideas in my research questions. So I think I'd be interested in adding a criterion where you try to assess how much mental effort is being outsourced to the tools. And and depending on the kind of work that your users are doing, you'll want to make different judgments about that kind of thing. So for undergraduates, especially for first and second year students, I really want them to be going through that exercise. I'm less concerned about it for our graduate students.
That's a interesting thought. It kind of brings in the teaching and learning element to the framework where, I don't know if anybody else was getting the crap test vibes out of the React framework, but it's I feel like it's sort of based on the crap test, which is more about evaluating sources. So I think that's a cool idea to bring in more like specific thoughts about how it affects teaching and learning. Yeah, Steve. Steve was raising his hand. Maybe that was a mistake, or maybe Steve's muted.
Yeah, it actually helps when I unmute.
I've never made that mistake before.
Oh, and they got a lot of technology. So I'm Steve at the North Dakota State Library, and so we have a much much wider audience of potential database users than ACR2 or a specifically undergraduate. We're working with school libraries and public libraries and big public libraries that have MLSs on staff and small libraries that don't have MLSs on staff. Um, I like the idea of at least some scorecard stuff, and then because that will help people who are not up on what this technology is and how it works to kind of say, oh, well, they said this is a good tool because that so often, and even just for myself, it's so hard sometimes to identify what the good tool is, how does it work, how do we know that it's a good tool, and so kind of having some of that, shall we call it, independent evaluation, I think it might be very valuable, and then that kind of goes hand in hand somewhat with your next point of the excitement of AI with libraries. Um, yeah, my experience has been that most people do not know how to form a good search to begin with. And then when you start to get them into prompt engineering aspect of searching with that AI tool, they don't know how to form a good search. And so some of it's also that education because with library staff that doesn't know how to do good searching, they're not going to have good success using an AI tool um, because they don't know what terms they're looking for and so on. And so that would also tie into that bottom one of how do we teach this for people as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'm curious. Anybody else has thoughts on how your teaching has changed?
Greg, Matt, there's a question from Shannon in the chat if you see that.
I do see that. Within a public library setting, there's been some concerns voiced about whether the benefit of AI tools justifies the environmental impact. Is there a way to assess or score a resource's AI environmental load? It's an interesting question. I could see generally sort of the way having that be a consideration in AI and hard to suss out probably for any individual tool, but it's an important concern. Greg, I see Brian has his hand raised.
Brian.
Hi. I think it's changed the way I've taught a little bit because some AI features have been added to our library catalog, where it kind of has uh, I guess a GPT effect, a chat GPT effect. Um, so now instead of like just going teaching just a catalog and like maybe talking about a little bit of Boolean or something like that. What is called it for us is the research assistant. So I will open up the research assistant, show them how to type in a question in a natural language, and then explain how it works once they type in the search terms because it actually um, shows you what it's doing um, to a point. So it's letting you know that it's going to return like 5 resources back. And then I can point out to like when a particular document was published and from what source and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, in that way, it's changed how I've taught because they just added it in there. So, and I was also thinking about what Mr. Kuntz said about the mental load because I feel like some of the universities around me, we're kind of one of the ways we are judged by our board of governors is like how quickly we can get a student to graduate or something like that. And I guess maybe um, an AI tool that's going to lift some of the mental load off of a student would almost be attractive in a way in order to meet that benchmark. But you know, you have to wonder like how helpful I guess that would be in the long run, long term for the student. But yeah,
That's a definitely one way I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I could see that absolutely from their shoes. Brian, I was wondering if is it like is there any palpable sense that your students when you're showing them this stuff are like kind of more engaged or more interested because there are AI features than kind of your traditional database search or advanced search box?
I get blank stares, so I'm not sure how interested they are in it.
Par for the course. And Amy, you made a comment here. It seems like it's just kind of takes more time. So you've got more things to cover.
If I could add one comment to that,
Yeah.
I would just say that I feel more confident demoing our catalog's AI features because it's getting the information from academic articles, and so it feels like less dangerous AI than, so anyway. I'm sure there's still the environmental impact and all the rest, but at least it's getting its information from academic sources is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, thanks. And Chuck.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Amy. It's nice to be able to kind of demonstrate to our students that okay, yeah, these AI tools have landed and the library is actually staying current with technology as it's coming around. I do think that the environmental impact question is a big one. I know that when, as I mentioned before, we are primarily an EBSCO house, and when we were discussing using these features in our discovery platform, EBSCO had mentioned that they did not actually train the language model, which is the larger computer processing lift. I believe they are licensing their model from I think it's Perplexity, if I'm remembering correctly. So they're using the Claude language model, but they are limiting um, that tool to what appears in EBSCO databases. And so it's not it's a much leaner use of AI in that way. Um, but uh, but yeah, and I think yeah, Brian, your comment also just about the blank stares. Yeah, we get some of that. But yeah, being able to actually demonstrate that, yeah, we're not just stuffy people who want to go tell you to look up the journals from 1974. It's we're staying current too. So.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Hey,
There's
I
a
think,
comment in the chat from Holly and a couple of another comment from Eric.
hey, Ann, I think we wrapped up the discussion if you'd like to talk about the survey.
Yeah. So here's our survey link. We would love it if you would take it. I think there's just really good energy that comes at you if you take a survey. So thank you for doing that if you can have a chance. And wanted to just remind you about joining us for our next sessions, harnessing AI for OER, AI and accessibility, and AI for transcription. Those will be interesting and fun to see you at as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any further questions, Matt and Greg's slides and email should be available to you soon, and the recording. So thank you.
Hey, Ann, could you put the link to the survey in the chat? People are wondering.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Oh, hey, there we go. Carla got it. Thanks everybody for following along and bringing your thoughts in at the end.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Matt and Greg. That was awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Great job.
See ya.